Welcome to the Startup Grind. Let me introduce David, and just a huge thanks to him for coming out. Thank you so much.
I haven't done anything yet, but
well,
thank you.
I've set the expectation, so where are we going here? So we actually got introduced to David through Rod, who we really appreciate, who's been here and been a big supporter of the event. David is a venture partner at Bessemer Ventures, and has been a partner since 1992. Invested in network technologies, infrastructure, SaaS, consumer internet, data security. Current portfolio includes, I had to really shorten the list, but some of the big names: Delivery Agent, LinkedIn, Reputation.com, Smule, and the Red Hot Zoosk. Bessemer Partners has also invested in companies like Site Advisors, Staples, Skype, and many, many more. More than 20 of David's startup investments have gone to IPO. His portfolio includes Flycast, Hot Jobs, and Playdom, acquired by Disney last year. In 1995, David co-founded VeriSign and served as the chairman. He's received his AB in mathematics and computer science, his MBA also all at Harvard, pretty good school. And David is consistently ranked as one of the top venture capitalists and venture investors in the world. He blogs at Who Has Time for This, and if you're on Twitter, if you're tweeting with hashtag #StartupGrind, go follow him right now at David Cowan, DavidCowan. And you also perform in the Voices in Harmony group, which, if you've got 10 minutes, which everyone in this room does if they're at this event, go to YouTube and watch some of these videos. They're really, really amazing. So I thought maybe we could just start. I know everyone in this room has heard of many of these companies that we just mentioned, but maybe we could just talk a little bit about kind of your background. You're kind of very early, where you got your start in terms of being a founder and into becoming a venture capitalist. So take us back to VeriSign. Take us back to how did this kind of all get started for you?
Okay. So I didn't mean to get involved in the technology industry. It was really kind of an accident. I loved computer science, so I studied computer science in college, and I had some friends who worked with me down at in the science center. We had a job, we were called terminal watchers, and that's basically what we kind of did. And they told me when I was graduating, you have to come interview with this company, Oracle, which I'd never heard of, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't really care. And I was I was all set to go off and get some job at some investment bank or management consulting firm or something that was much more glamorous back then. But my friends kept saying, just come to the interview. So I went, and back then Oracle was just hiring like crazy. They didn't care who I was. All they knew I was a computer science major, and so Larry Ellison had told his recruiter that he's got to bring in a certain number of computer science majors every year. So 2 minutes into this interview, I didn't even know what Oracle did. He said, I really want you to come meet the team at Oracle. And
this is with Larry.
There's Larry Lynn, his recruiter.
Larry Lynn,
okay?
Yeah.
And he says, I really want you to come to California. And he puts his plane ticket down on the table. and nobody had ever given me a plane ticket before, and I'd never been to California. So I sort of looked at it and I said, well, okay, I guess I'll go to California. And I went to California, and I came out here and I saw this company, Oracle, and how exciting it was, and everybody was actually pretty smart and pumped up, and they were building product. And then at night, I went to my friend's house and we sat in a hot tub and enjoyed California weather. And it kind of changed my plans. And I decided maybe I'll go do this Oracle thing for a couple of years because it's fun, and then I'll go back to the real world. And I think that's kind of a decision that I think a lot of people here are thinking about, which is there's this really fun thing that I want to do, and then there's the real world of what I'm supposed to do. And I can tell you that as I think back on all the steps that have kind of worked for me, it always, when I said I'm going to go do the fun thing that I really want and push off the other stuff, in retrospect, that was always the right decision. So I came out here to Oracle, worked here for a couple of years, and then I'd once heard about the venture capitalists, what they do, and I thought that sounds pretty interesting because I had a little company, but it wasn't that successful. I had a little software company that kind of got me partially through college. But the idea that I would help start things and be involved in starting new businesses, that was something I really enjoyed, and I thought that sounded great. I heard these venture capitalists do that. I didn't know anything about venture capital. Back then, venture capital was a very small little cottage industry. I didn't know from Mayfield or Bessemer or Kleiner or anybody else. But somebody told me at work that all the venture capitalists all work at 3000 Sand Hill Road. So one day I just got in my car and I said, all right, I'm going to go find 3000 Sand Hill Road. And so I just drove there and then I parked the car and I just started walking around and looking at the names on the doors, trying to figure out who these people were and what they do. And I walked into one of them and I said, hey, does this firm hire summer people? By then I had applied to business school and I was accepted to business school, so I knew I was going, but I thought maybe I'll come here for the summer. And so, by the way, don't go to business school. That's a different, okay? That was a mistake. That was me doing the right thing, the tried and that was a waste of time. I should have stayed out here. There's a lot more business school in this building than there is, in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So, at least for an entrepreneur. So, but I knew I was going to business school, so I said, do you guys hire summer people? And a very nice receptionist, I don't know who she is, I wish I did. She said, no, we don't. I said, well, do you know who does? And she took out some directory and she circled 5 names. She said, I think these firms do. And so I sent letters to those 5 firms, because back then that's what you did, you sent a letter. And one of them hired me for the summer, that was TA Associates, and the other one interviewed me and didn't hire me, but then I went to business school, and there was this partner there, Neil Brownstein, and I really liked Bessemer because it was more of a start. TA is a later stage investor, and I really wanted to be involved with startups, and Bessemer was a startup venture firm. So when I was in business school, I sent him a Hanukkah card and a chain letter. I didn't really have anything else to send him. I didn't have anything of value to offer the guy, but I was just trying to keep that, connection. Yeah. And then when I got
for those in the audience that are too young, this is an actual letter, a chain letter, right?
Like it was a letter, yeah.
Yeah. Not like the chain emails, I'm saying. That's what we send now, right? You send a chain email.
Yeah. I guess so. I guess it was like the first viral thing.
Yeah, this was
right? This was it. This was the beginning. Yeah. So it worked, right? I guess he remembered me and he introduced me to his partners in Boston, and I hung out with them, and they took pity on me and hired me, and I worked there for a little while in Boston, and then I moved out here, and I've been out here since. The VeriSign thing is something that I started while I actually was at Bessemer. So even though I was working as a venture capital investor, I was trying to do venture capital, and it wasn't working too well, and so I had to start this company, VeriSign, because it was the only way to invest in it was to start it first.
Yeah.
So there was a company called RSA. I don't know if anybody remembers RSA. RSA stands for Ravest Shamir Edelman. These are 3 mathematicians who invented public key cryptography. And although there are 2 other mathematicians, Diffie and Hellman, who say they invented public key cryptography, but RSA was a company out here that was licensing these public key cryptography toolkits, and it was a rather esoteric thing. And back then, security was not something that venture capitalists invested in, because security was only something that you sold in a box to the government so they can encrypt communications from like one ship to another. I mean, it was that was it, and so it was just nothing. I mean, VCs just were not interested in security.
Yeah.
So I was interested in security though because when I was in school, I was using this network, this TCP/IP network to send SMTP emails around, and one of the first investments I made at Bessemer was it was the first venture-backed ISP, a company called Performance Systems International. And back then, the idea of an ISP was not about the web. The web didn't exist. But I thought I was investing in an email company, because this was a company that was hooking up TCP, giving you a TCP/IP router to connect to so you could send SMTP mail from one company to another. So I thought, well, if companies are going to start opening up their networks, then maybe security is going to be more important. maybe someone's going to have to figure out what goes in and what goes out. So I thought maybe somewhere out there it makes sense to make one security investment. I mean, maybe two. Like I thought maybe there's going to be one or two that are going to be worth investing in.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought these RSA guys, this public key cryptography really seems like the right way to create encrypted sessions, and so I called them up and I said, can I come talk to you? I'm a venture capitalist, and but I didn't have a track record or anything. But these guys were a little desperate, so they said okay. So they met with me and they said, VCs really haven't been that interested in what we're doing. I'm glad that you're interested, but because we've had this angel investment, 51% of the company now. To invest, you got to go talk to him. I said, okay, where's he? Turns out he lives in the Everglades. So I flew out to Florida, to Miami, and then I drove for hours through the Everglades into this building with this corrugated roof in the middle of the Everglades, like literally, I mean, in the middle of swampland, right? Yeah. And I met this guy who's, by the way, a terrific entrepreneur and philanthropist named Addison Fisher. I don't know if anybody's heard of Fisher International, but he's actually quite an accomplished entrepreneur who saw this value in RSA and was buying it up. And so I said, I want to invest in RSA because I think that there's this opportunity to create transactions, to enable transactions on the internet, and to create a certificate authority. And Ron Rivest talks about this idea that we can have a certificate authority, and he said, well, okay, but you're going to have to invest at a valuation of $20 million. And I have to tell you, back then, $20 million was like not a normal valuation. Okay, that was like that was like a Zynga valuation, right? And and so I said, well, I can't do that. I mean, that's crazy. And so I what else can I do? Well, he was really interested in the patents. He thought these patents were really valuable, and I thought the idea of enabling transactions on the internet was actually more valuable. That was just sort of a crazy idea that RSA wasn't doing. They could. So I said, what if I start a company that does the transactions, and then we just do a deal, and you can own part of this, and I'll take that technology out of RSA. He said, oh, sure, no problem, as long as I get to keep the patents. So I incorporated VeriSign. Back then, I called it Digital Certificates International. I incorporated it from our offices in Boston, and then I called up Jim Bidzos, who was the CEO of RSA. I said, okay, let's do a deal now. And for like two or 3 months, I was negotiating with him this detail of this technology deal. Uh-huh. And there were a couple of times that, Jim hung up the phone and said, forget it, this isn't going to work, Mm-hmm. And then I have to call him up again and say, no, this is going to work. We can, okay, I cave, let's compromise and let's figure out how to make this work. And so I pretty much did what he wanted in terms of the terms of the deal. And it was kind of a crazy idea, though. I don't know how familiar people are with public key cryptography and SSL and how it works with these certificate authorities, but the idea of creating a company around a certificate authority, and there's nothing proprietary. Anybody can create a certificate authority, but the idea of creating this company around a certificate authority, and we weren't selling software, and we weren't selling hardware. That was all there was back then. There was software and hardware. We were selling certificates, and my partners, I remember saying to me, what's a certificate, right? And I said, well, it's an integer, okay? But it's a really big integer, okay? Really big, And so they thought it was kind of crazy, but they said okay. They got me feeling self-conscious, like maybe it's crazy to sell integers. Maybe that's not going to work. And I remember actually on the eve of closing the big financing, we put a little money in, but then the big financing where we put the $1.5 million in, I remember pulling Ron Rivest aside and saying, Ron, is this really going to work? Like this whole certificate authority thing, right? And he said, yeah, it's going to work, right? And gave me that little extra boost of confidence. And so we closed and we started the company. We took some people out of RSA and we started issuing, certificates to anybody who wanted to do public key cryptography. We didn't really have a plan. We just were going to go after this idea, and we were manually issuing certificates. And then really the real important value creation at the company was when we hired a team actually figure out what we were going to do, and that started with the CEO Stratton Sklavos. And so we hired a recruiter named Stephen Combs, who's still out there, and Stephen Combs helped us find Stratton Sklavos. And Stratton turned out to be a star. And I can tell you that when we looked at his resume, he didn't look like a star. Okay, I don't think he'd mind me saying this. His previous job was at Taligent. You probably never heard of it for a good reason. It was a joint venture of Apple and IBM. And before that, he was the VP sales at Go, which was that startup that Randy Kaplan wrote about in the book called Startup, which made the famed tablet that was, a big creator of venture capital. And so this guy was not, his track record did not speak success.
Yeah.
But he himself is a go-getting, winner. And so when we couldn't hire the first 3 people we wanted to hire, we said, okay, this guy, he's the right guy. So it turned out to be the right guy. So and then he hired in a team, and then they did something which I learned a lot from, which is Stratton really simplified the messaging and the value proposition of the business. Because up until then, I was so excited about public key cryptography. Whenever I was selling anybody on this, I would tell them about the keys and how you could do non-repudiation and how you have these one-way functions and they're asymmetric. And imagine if you could do this and then you encrypt this way, and it was nobody followed it or cared, or it just seemed. And Stratton came and he said, no, we're not talking about any of that. This is a driver's license for the internet. That's what this is. And he came up with this simple idea. It's a driver's license for the internet. If you want to go driving around the internet, you need to have something that says that you are who you say you are. That's what this is. Now you could, now today, with all the nuances of security and identity and all that, you could argue whether that's exactly the right metaphor. It doesn't matter, because it was the right metaphor back then. It worked. People understood it, and people understood what the value proposition was, which is you can now do commerce on the internet, and you knew whom you were dealing with, and so you could put your, you could put your credit card into the browser because the little lock goes on, and that's what we needed to do.
Do you feel like that's a trait of ultimately successful entrepreneurs, is that they're able to simplify the message? And the example I would give is we had Jeff Smith here a few months ago, and that's one of his key points that he stressed, was that you need to be able to talk about your product in 3 or 4 words tops, and you need to allow people to really understand. I mean, is this a common theme that you see now that you've seen hundreds and hundreds of startups, or is it not? Is it something that's totally necessary, or is it not?
I think it's absolutely critical. I think it's it's a really bad sign when someone's pitching me on a company and I can tell you 5 minutes into the pitch, I still don't know what they do. Right? I don't understand what the company's product. I really don't understand what I'm hearing. That's just not right. It should be, 3 words. It turns out Jeff's company, he can explain that in 3 words, right? Make social music. That one. So he can say, oh, everyone should do 3 words. Well, 3 words, not everybody can do 3 words, but everybody ought to be able to do 3 sentences.
Yeah.
And so, and if you can't, there may be value in what you're building, but it just makes it, but there's so much friction in trying to explain it to the world that it's going to be hard to actually make it work.
So it sounds like, in terms of your experience with getting into VC and you talking about, how it was so different then. As you've seen it, over the last 20 years, how have things changed? And then where do you see it, today and versus where it was 20 years ago?
Sure. Well, boy, it's different in so many ways, right? I think so. So I'll limit my. You're asking me. I'm not sure if you're asking me about venture capital or about the startup world. There's sort of 2 sides to it. I think what's much more interesting is what's changed about startups, and I think specifically in the technology world, the huge change, which changes everything, and it changes venture capital, it changes everything, is that technology. I think of what's happened to technology because of the internet as what happened in the field of physics when people realized that when people said light well, they kind of went back and forth, but when they said that light is not particles, it's a wave. Technology used to be particles. It used to be that we would ship boxes and we'd ship software, and you paid for them. You paid it, and maybe you paid for support, you paid for maintenance, but most of the value was up front. You got some technology, and you had a license to that technology, right? Now it doesn't make sense anymore for any sort of technical product not to be connected. There's so many reasons to connect technology in terms of even just updating it and making sure that it works better than it did last week. That today there's really nothing that anybody buys that's not connected. And so as a result, technology is no longer delivered as particles, it's delivered as a wave. You buy a service, you're buying access to a technology that you expect is going to get better and better the longer you're using it. This idea that you just get it and then the company goes away. I mean, the idea that you would even use technology from a company that doesn't exist anymore, we all think that's crazy. But back then, that was actually quite normal. Well, I have the license. I don't need the company anymore, right? And so that changes business models, right? What it is that we sell, what it means to sell, what it means to have a customer, all of that is very different today than it was. Another major driver that makes things different, of course, is the fact that we can now so quickly. I mean, this is sort of a variation on the singularity, but we can create interesting technology so much faster, so much cheaper. Moore's law extends to the startup world. And in fact, at Bessemer, we have something called the Internet Law. And the Internet Law, as we look back, says that to create a secure, scalable e-commerce application takes half the time and half the money every 18 to 24 months. So, and we look back from 1995 and we've mapped it, and you can see that curve very clearly. In 95, there were 96, I remember startups very clearly paying $20 million to Perot Systems and others to build them an e-commerce application. And you could see because of everything, because of Apache and load balancing and hosting, and then JavaScript and ActiveX and PHP and then XML and then Ruby, and then everything. You could just see that curve coming down, and it becomes faster and faster. So that also changes a lot the whole way that you think about startups, because back when I joined Bessemer, the business model for a technology company was that you have some idea, and you hire the engineers and you start building it, and you build it for a while, and then you hire salespeople, and the salespeople go out. You hire a couple of salespeople, and they go out and they get some beta sites. These are companies, because it was just enterprise was the only place to go. And you'd get some beta sites, and then you'd hire some more salespeople, and then you'd raise some more venture capital, and then you'd fire some salespeople because you missed your number, and then you'd try to get some more venture capital, and then you'd go hire some more salespeople, and then after a couple of 3 rounds of venture capital, you finally found out that there was something wrong with the product that you designed, because it actually doesn't meet the customer needs. It met the needs of people. It turns out there's something wrong with what you thought the market wanted. And by then you've blown, $30 million and lots of years of people's lives. So that was what most of the investments were like back then.
Yeah.
Today, we have a situation where you dream up a company, and 2 people and some contractors that you find through Odesk in wherever, and you pull together the thing, and you put up the site, and you have users, and then you find out, oh, it didn't work. Okay, it didn't work, right? You go on to the next thing, right? And you spent $50,000, $100,000 to figure that out.
Yeah.
The idea that you would then zig and zag and try to pivot because you've already spent $20 million and now we have to do something else. That was another thing back then, is that you found out there was something wrong with your product. The team would say, well, that's okay, we could do something else. And of course, everybody had so much invested at that point that you really wanted to believe you could do something else. And that was normally a recipe for just losing more money and losing more time. And so today, the way I like to think about it is that today failure is an option. It's an option that you should expect. It's an option we expect. It's a normal part of figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And so that also changes the way venture investors behave. It used to be that venture capitalists loved talking about themselves as being supportive. We're supportive. We're supportive. And what that meant was that we will give you money even when your product fails. We will give you more money. And we will keep giving you money even when you're having problems. This sounds ridiculous. This is, I don't know. This is actually the way venture capital firms talked about themselves, 10, 15 years ago. That we will support you, we will figure it out, right? Well, it's just, to me today, that's just stupid, right? If something's not working, we'll stop doing it and just do something different, right? And so today, a supportive VC doesn't mean we're going to keep putting money into something that's not working. So today, a supportive VC means, hey, if it doesn't work, let's figure it out together, and then let's do something else together, right? And let's, which by the way, Jeff Smith and I, we worked on other ideas that didn't work. And then we said, okay, that's not working. Jeff came to me and said it's not working. He didn't like wait for his investors to say it's not working. And then we tried something else.
Yeah, that worked. You're saying he iterated 2 or 3 times to get to where they are today, which.
So I know Jeff Smith was here, and I don't know if he told you about the genesis, but I'll tell you the genesis from
He didn't.
Okay, so I'll tell you what the genesis of Smule. So Jeff was a CEO of a company I'd backed called Tumbleweed, which was a security company that sold to banks. So this is about as, enterprise as you get, right? Security company selling to banks. And Jeff was very good at it, and he grew the company and he took it public, and then he decided, I'm gonna go get a PhD in music at Stanford for a couple of years. And so he went and he did that. And then when he was itching to do something again, he said, okay, David, what should I, do you have any ideas of what I should do? I said, well, come be an entrepreneur in residence at Bessemer, and we'll find something, right? We'll work on together. And so he came to Bessemer, and we naturally assumed that because he knows everything about security for banks, that he was going to go start a company having something to do with security or banking or some other enterprise thing having to do with his experience at Adobe or something like that. And so, he and I went to a lot of meetings with companies who were pitching things, and we were, in case they needed a CEO or if they needed money, we had both, right? And then one day, I had some guy was coming in to pitch me on this plastic thing that shoots these laser lights that he was selling in Sharper Image. And when you block a light, it makes a musical tone. Okay, so it's like some Sharper Image music thing. And he said he was in charge. So all right,
sounds awesome.
Yeah, it sounds awesome, right? So I said, okay. And then I said, hey, I was going into the meeting. I said, Jeff, you know something about music. Why don't you come in this meeting with me? Why don't you, he comes in the meeting, and the guy pulls out this plastic thing. It's a plastic thing with lights. And when you put your hand in front, it makes a music tone. And then when you put your hand here, it makes a music tone. And you put your hand here and it goes da 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 da, and just da 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 da, right? And if you got good, you can kind of play da 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 da, and that, and he was selling these on. It's like, this is great, right? This is the revolution in music. And and so we said, well, what happens when we're saying, what happens when we, what if I play something and I like it? Can I save it? Can I send it to somebody? Can I, is there some way to, he says, no, that's, people don't want that. People want this. And so Jeff, he put various body parts in front of the lights, trying to, have fun with it. But it was what it was. It was a piece of plastic, and we said, it feels like this is something people buy and they put in their closet along with all the other stuff they bought from Sharper Image. And then he left, and then Jeff and I were talking about, what are the things you could do with music? Like, what if you could do anything? If you wanted people to be expressive with music, how could you unleash that creativity? And we just started riffing on different ideas of what you could do. And what if people could play music and do it together? What if we could take people who aren't musically trained and help them be musical and actually jam and actually figure out how to make music together? Right? That would be awesome. And we're trying to figure out how we would do that. And then Jeff said, well, with this iPhone thing, maybe this iPhone thing was new. He said, maybe we could do something with that. And we started thinking about the iPhone thing. And at the end of this, so we sat talking around for about an hour. And I said, Jeff, you seem pretty animated about this music stuff. You like this music stuff. You should do something in music, right? And it was like somebody had was like somebody had lifted something off his shoulder because he was an enterprise guy. I'm an enterprise guy. That's what I'm going to do. I'm at Bessemer. I'm an entrepreneur in residence. I'm going to find an enterprise company. That's what I know how to do. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I'm going to do. And then somebody says, no, you love music. Figure out this music thing. And after that, I can tell you, he did not come to a single meeting with any other enterprise companies for the rest of the summer. He was just thinking about music. And, 3 days later, he said, you got to come with me to Stanford. You got to meet my friend this guy, Wang, who's this professor and you got to meet And, and the two of them were just crazy with all these crazy ideas. And it didn't make any sense, but they were so excited and they were so brilliant and they were so creative that I said, look, this is just a waste of money, but here's some money. Go figure out, and I figured maybe they'll probably have some fun and then Jeff will come back and then he'll build a real company, right? But in the meantime, let's see what happens, right? And so they got in a room and they got all these grad students of GUZ to come there and some others from Princeton, and they built the sonic lighter and they did the ocarina and there was no doubt that this was going to be a really interesting venture, right? And so it brings me back to my lesson that you got to do what you love.
Yeah, it feels like too that you hit those moments. I know at least as an entrepreneur, you hit those moments where you just want to do anything else but be in that situation. It gets so tough, it gets so hard, and if it's not something that you love, if it's not something that you're passionate about, chances are you'll probably walk away. You'll probably give up. And I don't know. Is that the experience that you see? Do you see that entrepreneurs that are passionate about it, they push harder, they go longer, they go just far enough, they go just long enough until they see, light at the end of the tunnel? What is the difference between those entrepreneurs that you see?
Right. So usually what gives somebody that passion, that feeling that I love doing this, that I want to do this, is usually when the entrepreneur is actually a customer of the company, so customer of the technology. So usually, the pattern that I see most frequently that leads to success is somebody sees an opportunity to create some technology that can be used and can be valuable and says, nobody's done this right and I'm going to do it right because I know what needs to be done. And it could be something that's, fun, like making social music, or it could be something like, how to complete a financial transfer payment from this kind of a company to that kind of a company. It may sound like a boring thing, but for this person, it's really exciting. And this person sees this vision of how to do it better, and wants to show that it can be done. So now I will contrast that with the other type of entrepreneur, okay, which I think is generally less successful. And the other entrepreneur is the person who wants to start a company, okay? Person who wants to start a company, and that's what's driving the person to start a company, that doesn't work so well, okay? So.
Does it ever work?
Yeah.
Not very well.
Less often.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, we've got a lot of people that are, it's interesting you say that. I look around the room, we've got guys working on specific things in startups, that are interested in, Eric over here is working on Startup Lists, which is, very targeted at startups, which he's passionate about. Spencer's making his game, which, he quit Apple to do. So Bessemer, invest in anywhere between. What would you say in terms of entrepreneurs you see, or how many ideas you guys get pitched? What percentage is that? Is it, how often are you guys meeting with new, entrepreneurs, new ventures, these guys you talk about with Jeff?
I used to be able to answer that question, and when I was able to answer that question, the answer was about 100 to 1 in terms of meetings to investments. That was back when the world was simpler. A meeting was a meeting, and it either led to an investment or it didn't. Today, what is a meeting? What is a pitch? What is, I get pitched, 5 times when I open up a TechCrunch page and I'm seeing all the startups. I get pitched on Twitter. I get pitched on, every time I get an email from Naval Ravikant at AngelList, I get pitched so many times a day as, everybody. We all see pitches from startups. So do you count those? Which ones do you count? Do you count the ones only where I'm actually in the same room with somebody? What if I'm watching a WebEx? What if I go try the products? I think this is really interesting. What if somebody else at Bessemer, is looking at it? And I mean, so it's a little bit harder to say today what that ratio is. Yeah. But there's a huge funnel, and it it comes down to these 15 to 25 a year. The process for getting funded by Bessemer, or really by any large venture firm, is that you start off usually by pitching somebody who is more junior at the firm, because if somebody comes to me and they say, I want to, I'm going to send them to somebody else who's going to get the first pitch. Some people get kind of offended by that. Okay, they say, no, I want a partner. All right, so go somewhere else. I mean, that doesn't work. That's not a business. That doesn't work for us, right? I mean, you can't tell your story 3 times? What's the matter? Is it not, I mean, what, are you bored? I mean, come in. If somebody's willing to listen, go tell them the story, right? And then they're going to say, okay, now you're going to tell it again. Tell it again. And then you say, tell it again now to all the partners, and then tell it again to all the partners, okay? And just don't take it personally if somebody says, no, first you have to go through this little process, okay? It would not make any sense for us. It would not make any sense for me sitting on, 12 boards that I have to go to board meetings every day for me to, every time I hear about a startup, to say, oh yeah, I'm going to give you an hour, without knowing. I mean, it would be impossible.
Yeah.
So don't be offended if you get that.
In terms of these guys that get through, we've talked about a couple of those traits that you've seen. Are there any kind of other clear, things that you see within these guys that you say, you sit down with these entrepreneurs in the first 5 minutes, you say, he's got that, he's got these things. Are there any indicators that you see?
Well, so I'll answer that question, but first I'll answer a different question, which is, what's the most common characteristic of a successful entrepreneur? And the answer to that question is very simple. It is luck. Okay? Any other characteristic that you tell me is the defining characteristic of, Mark Zuckerberg and Larry Ellison and this person and that person, sorry, there is no such common characteristic. It's luck. Now, there are characteristics that I do look for in the first 5 minutes, I'll tell you. I mean, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. And what I'm looking for is a scientific mindset. I'm looking for somebody who is really interested in hard questions, somebody who has no problem talking about mistakes that have been made, somebody who talks about how a mistake, what somebody learned from a mistake rather than being defensive about it. That mindset is absolutely, I think, critical to being able to, be a data-driven, smart company that knows how to navigate, and also being able to just work with a team and being able to attract smart people who want to work for you. And so there are things that I look for. So for example, here's don't tell anybody. So here's one, like interview question, if you will, kind of thing. But
it's going on YouTube.
Yeah, I ask people. I say, well, tell me, First, I always start with a little background. I'll tell you about me. Tell me about yourself. Where do you work? So they tell me where they worked. Everybody worked somewhere that I've heard of, right? And every company that you've heard of went through some difficult period, right? I mean, any company, no matter how good, did something boneheaded somewhere along the way, right? You worked at Apple. Oh, God, did you know about these location files on those iPhones? Like, what was that about? I mean, and Apple may not be such a great example because Apple is such a sort of an authoritarian run organization. But if I'm interviewing an executive and this person claims to have been an executive at a company, and I say, well, gee, you guys really, you had that hard time that year where you missed, and I ask them about something that went wrong, and one of two things happens. The person says, oh yeah, we really screwed up. This is what we did. And here's why we did it. And that was really hard. And then we had to do this to get out of it, and we had to do this to get out of it. That's a really good answer. The other people say, oh yeah, those guys really screwed up. I told them not to do it. I told them this is what's going to happen, right? And then so he or she told them what was going to happen. Obviously wasn't very compelling, in the presentation, right? Because they didn't listen to this person, right? And this person had nothing to do with it, right? So to me, that's when I start looking at my watch. But there's other signs of it. There's other signs of this mindset of look, here's another one. Sometimes I ask a question and the person says, I don't know the answer to that one. That's a good question. That's a really good answer, right? And nobody knows all the answers, especially if they've got a startup. Somebody asks a tough question and says, well, how are you going to monetize your service is going to include people in Egypt and China, but your advertisers aren't going to monetize them. How are you going to make money? That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good answer. I don't know. We're going to have to figure that out. That's going to be hard. I think there are ways to monetize people in those countries. I think they're valuable users, but I don't know the answer yet. Right now, we're just focused on the product. We're going to have to figure that out. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, but you have to balance that with, you have to have some answers, right? I mean, you can't, because the alternative, right, is like, I don't know. That's a great question, That one too, man. You're really, So I mean, what is it? Where is that balance of being humble and being, honest and easy to work with? By saying, hey, we screwed up, versus like, hey, this guy, he's not a complete idiot. He knows some of the answers. He knows,
see, that's the thing is I don't think there's a balance there.
Yeah.
I think go for the idiot over the arrogance.
I know everything.
Any time.
Yeah, that's good advice.
I may be particularly sensitive to this issue, but I think most investors, by the way, respond in a similar way.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So I'm going to ask you a couple of just kind of rapid fire questions, and then if anyone here has questions, we can take those in just a minute. So these will go along the lines of, if you were a first-time entrepreneur in Silicon Valley right now.
I'm sorry, by the way, I just realized an answer to this.
Please,
this thing about,
ahead.
well, am I an idiot, right? There is an answer. The answer is, I'm going to hire the most brilliant user monetization person to work on that problem, right? I'm going to find, do you know somebody? And they say to me, can you help me find that person, right? Okay, now here's somebody who recognizes they don't know, and they're going to do something about it, and they're not just going to start a company with somebody because this person was my crony at school. I'm going to go find somebody who actually is the best person in the world at this, and who is that person? Can I help them? When entrepreneurs ask me for help, right, that's an entrepreneur. That's somebody who, what the definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who makes something with very few resources, right? Mm-hmm. And when they come in the meeting and say, what can I get out of David Cowan out of this meeting? That's good. Right? So
it's good for the entrepreneur. Yeah. But
it's good for the entrepreneur, and it's good for the entrepreneur's shareholders too.
Yeah.
Like that's because when that person's going to go to the next meeting and do the same thing, and the next meeting, and
continually add value along the way.
Yeah. It isn't trying to prove how smart he or she is. Instead, it's trying to get the job done.
Yeah. Well, okay, so if you were a first-time entrepreneur, these are real quick, and if you want to go in and explain these, you can too, or you can just give whatever you prefer. Would you apply for Y Combinator or the other incubators?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Would you?
I know people are laughing. I think people are laughing because they think that somehow venture capitalists are threatened by incubators or combinators or angels, or I know that I saw some, there's a lot of I think TechCrunch got a lot of views around this meme that angels and VCs are competing against each other, and I just got to tell you, I love the angel ecosystem. It's the greatest thing for my business. I think it's a little crazy. I think that angels sometimes are investing, are investing based upon anecdotal evidence of success rather than a real understanding of. But that's, some of them are doing well. And the ones who are doing well are going to inspire everybody else to keep doing it too. And I hope they do, because they're just funding all kinds of great startups out there that then Bessemer Venture Partners gets to pick from, right? Because the angels can't keep these things. The angels can't do the Series B.
Yeah.
Right? And so And so they're running these tests. I mean, they're turning over a card, and then we get to look at all these cards. So I think it's great.
And I apologize. These are not supposed to be gotcha questions. This is as a founder yourself. Would you do these things? And we get conflicting. I say we all get, as entrepreneurs, we all get conflicting advice on these things. Some people say, oh yeah, you got to get in Y Combinator. You have other people that say, oh no, do not apply to those things. So we get, just interesting to get someone with your perspective. What you would do in our situation.
So I don't actually. I'm not an expert on the nuances of one such school or another.
Yeah.
So I can't. I don't know the answer to which one is the right one. I think you do whichever one you can. I mean, it's not easy to get into any of these things, right? It's not easy to get money. It's not. I mean, I know I kind of laugh when people say, oh, what should you look for in a venture capitalist, or what should you look for in an angel? You look for the money, right? You look for somebody who's willing to give it to you. That's number one, right? If they're willing to give you the money, that is really important, right? So back to this meme about doing what you just make it happen. If you think you want to do it, make it happen. When I went to business school, yet another reason why you shouldn't go to business school. I was taking a class on venture capital, and the professor there, who's a very famous professor, he said, listen, whatever you do, he looked at the class, he said, when you graduate from business school, don't go into venture capital, okay? Don't go work for a venture capital firm, because you're all a bunch of, snot-nosed MBA kids who don't know anything, right? Nobody wants you giving them business advice. Nobody wants to hear from you as to whether their company's any good, right? Go do something real, and then if you like venture capital later on in life, do it. Well, that kind of makes a lot of sense, right? But that's not what I wanted to do, right? So I said, okay, that makes sense, but you know what? I'm gonna do it anyway. If somebody's foolish enough to offer me a job, I'll take it, and they'll have to put up with my snot-nosed ignorance or whatever. But that's what I'm gonna do. If you want to start a company, and Y Combinator invites you, then go to Y Combinator. If you want to start a company and somebody else invites you, then go.
Yeah. If you were a first-time entrepreneur and your startup wasn't getting traction despite all efforts, what would you do next?
Wasn't getting traction with users?
With users.
I would stop, and I would do something else. And that's okay.
If you were a first-time entrepreneur, which would you worry about at the early stages of your startup, your idea? Which would you worry about nailing first, your team or your product?
That's a good question. So I'd say there's, look, we all know that the reality is that there's two teams in any company. There's the team of, it could be two people, could be three people, it's people who are a team because they're a team. Whatever they'd be doing, that would be the team. And those people are going to try to make a product, right? Then when you have some success, then you go build the team. And then when you build the team, what you're hiring are people with functional experience, with expertise around engineering management and user acquisition and design and whatever else it is that you need to build functional experience around. Don't try to hire the functional experience before you have something that's successful, before you have a successful product. For one thing, you're not going to get the best people at that point, right? And it's not, so the step is, there's a team of people who trust each other, who work together, who respect each other, who are going to validate the heart and soul of the company, whatever the value proposition is. And you're going to show that users care. I'm saying users care. Obviously, there's different business models. Sometimes you don't have users. Sometimes you have whatever it is, subscribers or enterprises or whatever. But you're going to show that people care about it, and you're going to get some traction, and then you're going to go hire. And that's going to give you what you need to go recruit the best people to fill those functional positions.
If you were, this is our last one. If you were a first-time entrepreneur with an idea that kept you up at night, would you bootstrap the company and build a prototype as quickly as possible, or would you I'm not going to say write a business plan, but would you go try and raise money?
The former. You just try to do it. Yeah, you just try to build it. I'll tell you, when we do, we're supposed to do due diligence, right? We're supposed to check to see whether an idea makes sense. So in the old way, what this meant is we call up all these companies and say, if we had this product, would you buy it? Would you buy it? And we'd call everybody, and they would tell us, but it was kind of worthless because it was sort of some anecdotal evidence about a product that didn't exist, and maybe they changed their minds, and maybe they were maybe they were being polite, and who knows? It turns out that today, the best kind of due diligence to do on any kind of internet company is just build the damn thing and see what happens. Actually, you could build it cheaper than you could pay the consultants to go spend 3 months doing a market study, right? And then let the users tell you what to do. So always build it.
Great. Can we give David a round of applause? Does anyone have any questions? Do we have any questions from the group right here?
How important is it for team? How important is the team?
So the answer is, so the company needs both. It needs a good idea and it needs a good team. It needs both. It needs a great market. I'll tell you what can be missing. So let me kind of do it this way, okay? The product can be missing if it's a great team and we know it's a great market to be in. So, what's a great market to be in? Let's say you were talking about, mobile games with virtual currency. Well, we all know there's money to be made in social gaming with virtual currency. And if you had a great team that was going to do something there, that's a backable venture, even if they can't show you the games that they're building. The other thing that can be missing is if you have a great product that's working, and you don't have a team, but what you have is that you have evidence that this is a venture that's going to hire great people. So what I mean is maybe the founder has hired 1 or 2 really great people, right? And so it gives me confidence that the founder has a very high bar and is going to go find people like that to fill other positions. So I would much rather have positions not filled than have them filled with B players on the team, right? And so they don't have to be filled so long as I see that the ones that are filled are A's.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I don't know, back there.
Yeah. Do you ever have someone come up to you, pitch you something, but that person may not have the technical knowledge to bring that idea forward? It could be like low production line. All of a sudden, you have a really good idea, but software related. Completely different than what he does. He comes to you, pitches your idea. Do you ever have people like that come to you, and what are the odds of them succeeding?
Yeah, I get that. I've had Rod come to me with some great ideas. Seriously. And I think his son. I think he got them from his son, though. I think they came from him. And the good news is that today, look, if you're somebody who can then just start coding and make it happen, that's great. If you're not, it turns out that you can find those people today. You go on Odesk, you go around and you find people, and you can contract somebody to build what you want to build. I've got a friend, Dave Benetti, who's not a coder, but he had this idea that he wanted to build a social network around politics and civic interests, and bring people together who share political views, and be able to, go to your Congress representatives and say, I want you to do this, and be able to spread, and he's not a coder. He went on Odesk and he with a credit card, he hired people to go build this thing, and put this really interesting thing together, and then got some angels, and then after he had it, he showed it to angels, and angels invested, and then now then he got I think his last round was from Founders Fund or something. So so I think that's totally doable. You don't have to be a coder to be an entrepreneur.
So, in the old days, VC world, entrepreneurs would usually go chase down a VC and do everything possible to get to a VC or many VCs, right? Do you think that kind of just turned upside down, where VCs are kind of chasing companies now with these absurd amounts of money that is really going after startups that aren't doing anything, kind of like the the .com bubble again? Does it feel like that to you, from your perspective?
Well, you would know better than I would. So I mean, I don't. I do that sometimes, but when I'm doing it because there's a company that's doing something interesting where they're already pretty successful, and then I'll go chase them. But
do you analyze deals that you look, like, for example, Color, everybody knows about that, and you say, oh, what's going on? Or any deals, particularly, you say, some of these deals aren't making sense in today's world.
If there was such a market for derivatives, yeah. But sometimes I'm wrong, right? Sometimes I laugh at it, and I laugh at the VCs who funded it, and it turns out they were right. Yeah.
Security question is about the privacy. In this world of internet and mobile technologies and the storage getting so cheaper and cheaper, everyone, about 50 to 60% of the life data is stored in some server somewhere. So what would be the future lifestyle for individuals where the data is, a single person's data is everywhere scattered all over, like WikiLeaks kind of thing. The data will be, one person's data will be in many servers.
Right.
So what would be the future of an individual human being in about 5 to 10 years, at least? Have you come across any of these issues, any of those features?
So you're asking whether there are startups that are thinking about capturing all the data around an individual's experiences, or all the data associated with an individual and spreading it out for security reasons?
I'm more worried about, we know that's happening, maybe very soon also might have a huge data warehousing. Wondering about the individual people, individual human being, how could he live, and what would be the style of living in the future?
Right. Well, so I think there are. I think there is obviously an ongoing challenge for all of us to figure out how to get access to data about ourselves that we want access to, and not to share that access with people that we don't want to share it with. It's a higher level security concern, the way we encryption and that kind of thing, and so I think that's a pretty interesting set of problems to try to solve. I mean, I invested in a company, for example, called Reputation.com, and our value proposition is that we help people control what search engines say about them. So when someone searches about you, what do they see about you? There are a lot of other aspects to this problem, though, that need to be solved in an interesting way. Some of it has to be solved. Frankly, some of it probably has to be solved with legislation around what people can do with our data and what they can't. But most of it can probably be solved with technology, where we have more access to cookies and our profiles and those kinds of things. Is that what you're asking? Or you're asking me?
Reputation.com is what I was looking for, that kind of answer.
Yeah.
What are some of the nuances, or what's kind of essentially changed in the last, say, 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, in terms of just going and pitching your idea, your kind of business plan, your forma, having some kind of data? What's changed, and what do you think sort of going forward are some of the things that you need to cover that weren't even the issues that you have to cover that a few years ago?
Okay, well, so let me, I think I can. Let me share one. I mean, there's a lot of things, but let me just share one. Which I think is most important from my perspective as you think about a business plan. As I think about all the companies that we're invested in, and I look at Yelp and LinkedIn and Reputation.com and Zoosk and Playdom and Zynga, and we're not investors in Zynga, but Playdom and regardless of what they're doing and what their business model is, the whole business boils down to certain key metrics, which I'm not sure everybody is really quite attuned to, but should be. Every internet business has to get some value out of its users. You're either going to get value by showing them ads, through lead gen, through subscription, through maybe virtual currency, maybe through e-commerce transactions, right? Those are the 5. I mean, maybe there's more. Those are the 5 that I know of, right? And you're going to you somehow have to get that value. And every user has a lifetime value. You acquire a user, that user is going to have some value for you. There's a lifetime value to that user from some combination of those things. Then you have to acquire the user. You can acquire the user through PR, or through word of mouth, or maybe you're one of the very lucky few who have a truly viral application where people tell their friends and they bring the users in that way. And so I don't care whether it's a dating site or a business networking site or an identity theft protection service or whatever it is. It all comes down to the ins and the outs. There's the ins. What does it cost me to bring in a user? Through radio or TV or affiliates or Google or however it is, or Facebook, however it is I'm going to get the users in. I got a cost per acquisition and I got a lifetime value. And then I've got some time on how long it takes me to achieve lifetime value. And then the time to get it. That defines the business, right? I look at that and I say, is that a better business than this one based upon those 3? Now, there's one other metric which I look at, which is when you acquire users, how deep is the marketing channel for bringing in those users? So, for example, if you're bringing in users really cheaply and you're doing it through PR, well, that's not a very deep channel. You can't say I'm going to do 3 times as much PR this month. It just doesn't work that way. Can't do it, right? If you say I'm buying some Google keywords, okay, maybe you can buy 100 times as many keywords, or maybe you've saturated maybe you bought all the words you can, right? And the only way you can buy more is if you pay 5 times as much and your cost of acquisition goes up. So the next thing I look at is the depth of the channel that you have available to you, and then that tells me how big can this business get. So one is how profitable it is, how leveraged is the capital that goes in, and the next one is how big can it get. So if you focus in on those simple metrics, right, that's the rest of what you're talking about is just supporting, is the supporting cast. Those are the stars of the story.
Let's do one more question.
I just wanted to piggyback maybe on that previous question and the question on user traction. Do you find that entrepreneurs and possibly investors are getting a bit impatient on things taking time? Like, so sometimes, I mean, I work
Come on,
on
what? I don't understand the question. Hurry up.
And LinkedIn was definitely a marathon for the first 5 years. Just, it took time to get 500,000 users.
Okay.
Whereas now I feel like, the Zyngas, the Facebooks, we're just so used to that virality. Are we getting impatient with ourselves with some businesses, for example?
Okay, so the question is, are we too impatient building businesses, with LinkedIn as an example of a patient company? I would argue that Facebook and Zynga both followed a very patient strategy, because what they said is we're going to focus on, well, Zynga, not Zynga. Facebook said, Mark Zuckerberg has said, I want to focus on bringing value to my users, and we're going to make money. I know we're going to make money, but I want to focus on how to make this a great and you know, I can tell you as somebody has portfolio companies who try to advertise on Facebook, that Facebook makes it really hard to give them money sometimes. It's really as though they don't care, right? And they just want to figure out how to get more people in and increase engagement. I'd say that's a good kind of patience, right? And so happens they're so good at it that then they can back up the truck and, you know, and do really well. There's two kinds of virality, and I think it's helpful to understand the two different kinds of virality and to know which kind of business you're in. Because people talk about viral. Everybody wants a viral business. Viral businesses are the best. Love viral businesses. Your cost of acquisition is 0. It's the best, right? One kind of viral business is where users actually actively go tell their friends, you have to get on this service because I want to do something with you, right? Those are great. There aren't that many of those. If you've got one, please come see me. I'm really interested, okay? Those are great. There is another kind of viral business, though, and it's one where you don't actively say, I'm going to go get another user, but you create some kind of content that gets crawled on search engines, and then because that content is quality content, or at least interesting content, people see it, they click through, they come to the site. That's a much slower kind of virality, but it still works. LinkedIn, now LinkedIn has both, because LinkedIn, we have people inviting other people to be LinkedIn members, but more than that, we get users because our profiles are very highly profiled, or very highly indexed on Google. So you put in somebody's name, you're likely to see the LinkedIn profile in one of the top 3 results. And so that brings a lot of traffic in. That's a slower kind of virality. Yelp is another one where people don't tell their friends you got to get on Yelp, but they write a review, and then somebody types in a restaurant or a kind of food they want, Chinese food, San Jose, whatever it is, and they see Yelp reviews. They go, oh, let me check this out. They come to Yelp, right? So that's viral also. It's just the slow viral. For the slow ones, you have to be patient, and you have to say, you can't measure it based upon the revenue or based upon the users. When I look at companies like that, what I'm looking at is, okay, are you getting users to create content that's getting highly indexed in Google, right? You can show me flat numbers. That's okay. I'm all right. I mean, when we looked at Yelp, the numbers were not impressive, right? But what was impressive is that we were seeing Google highly ranking those reviews, and we said, oh, we get it. There's a chain here, and if we wait, that curve is gonna work in our favor.
Great.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Let's give David one more round of applause.